Prior to 1948, Palestine was under British colonization. The land was granted to the Jewish population without the consent of the native Palestinians through the Zionist movement, aiming to create a Jewish settlement called Israel. Western support and funding played a significant role. Consequently, in 1948, over 800,000 Palestinians were forcibly removed from their homes through mass killings and coerced evacuations. This event is known as the Nakba, signifying a catastrophe. Though the recognition of Israel's state was legal, the global community views Israeli settlements in occupied territories as illegal, as they are violate Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention and international declarations. Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention stated that Israel's policy of settling its civilians in occupied Palestinian territory and displacing the local population contravenes fundamental rules of international humanitarian law. Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention states the occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. It also prohibits the individual or mass forcible transfers as well as deportations of protected persons from occupied territory. Israel's practice of moving its citizens into Palestinian land breaks clear rules of international law. Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention says an occupying power can relocate its people into the occupied land, nor can it force out the local population. This extends to not taking over land and destroying property for settlements, which violates other laws of war. The aim of occupation law is to ensure the well-being of the people living there. Israel's action in building settlements, especially in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, don't follow these rules. These actions, defined as war crimes, involve extensive property destruction and the transfer of civilians into occupied areas, which goes against fundamental international norms. Organizations like the UN, the International Court of Justice, and the Red Cross affirm this view. If I can give an example regarding the issue that has been brought to commentary from ICJ, that illegal construction wall in Palestine that deprived the liberty of movement of Palestinians. UN resolutions dating back to 1979 labeled these settlements in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights as breaches of international law. Israel contends that the settlements comply with the law, stating that citizens were not forcibly moved there and arguing the territories weren't under the recognized sovereignty before. While most legal experts oppose the settlements, some disagree, and Israel's Supreme Court has expressed mixed opinion on their legality. Now guys, regarding the war, Article 51 of UN Charter allows states to use self-defense as how Israelis use this as an excuse. However, this article is not entitled to Israel because they are occupying power in the land of Palestine. You occupy them and you are now claiming self-defense? It is like you entering somebody's land and do cruelty, and then Palestinians repeat the crime by announcing war, and you killed them by war with illegal bomb. Now you wanted to claim as self-defense? That's not even your land, Israel.
Israelis have died and more than 900 injured. Kids and long-range missiles from Gaza entering Israel by land, air, and sea.
Let's talk about 7th October 2023 attack. Early in the morning, Hamas has launched missiles into Israel and entered into some provinces in Israel, including a province named Kibbutz, where a music festival have been held there. In consequence, many people died, and in response, Israel's military has launched missiles into high populated area in Gaza Strip. Then the conflict began, and until now, today is 27th October 2023, almost 7,000 people in Gaza has been killed and bombed by Israel's military. This number including almost 3,000 kids, while inside of Israel, there are 1,400 people died. Before we go deeper into the question of international law in regard with these issues, the most basic and important question need to be answered is whether or not both parties bound by the international law. International law which cover war crime is Rome Statute of International Criminal Court 1999. This statute has been established in 1998 and came into force in 2002. So according to Article 12, paragraph 2 and 3 of the statute, it stated that the jurisdiction of the ICC extends to two kind of states. The first one is states which ratified and signed the statute. The second one is state which not ratified and signed the statute but recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC. So the first one is Palestine, whether or not this country falls under the jurisdiction of the ICC and bound by Rome Statute. Palestine is not among those countries who signed and ratified the statute, but this country in 2009 has signed the recognition of the jurisdiction of the ICC. So in consequence, Palestine falls under the jurisdiction of the ICC and bound by Rome Statute. So any Palestinian people, even Hamas itself, who committed crime even outside Gaza Strip, for example in Israel, they falls under the jurisdiction of the ICC. So the second one is Israel, whether or not this country falls under the jurisdiction of the ICC. Israel is neither the country which signed and ratified the statute nor recognized the jurisdiction of the ICC. So does this mean that Israel can do whatever they want over Palestinian people? The answer is no, because Article 12 of this statute clearly stated that whoever committed crimes on the land of state members of the statute, regardless of the nationality, whether or not the country which he belonged to is among the members of the statute, their crime falls under the jurisdiction of the ICC. So, as the attack made by Israel was on the Palestinian land, thus this act falls under the jurisdiction of the ICC. This is just the same with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Russia is not among the members of the statute, but as the attack was made on the Ukrainian land, which Ukraine is one of the members of the statute, thus, the ICC has the power to issue warrant to arrest and investigate Vladimir Putin. So, if Netanyahu go outside the country of Israel, he can be arrested and convicted.
The next issue is that whether there are human rights violations committed by Israel resulting from the occupation on Palestinians. For a brief historical overview, Israel began building Israeli civilian settlements on Palestinian lands following 1967 war. Israeli citizens live in hundreds of Israeli settlements on occupied land not originally given to them in the United Nations partition plan, displacing hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. However, the occupation by Israel has violated some human rights on Palestinians.
So we move on to the what type of human rights violations that are committed by Israel to Palestinians. First of all, we have violation to right of life. Israeli soldiers, police, and security guards have unlawfully killed and injured many Palestinian civilians in occupied Palestinian territory, including during protests against confiscation and the construction of settlements. United Nations agencies and fact-finding missions have also expressed concerns about violence perpetrated by a minority Israeli settlers aimed at intimidating Palestinian populations. Secondly, we had violation of the rights to liberty, security of the persons, and equal treatment before the law. Amnesty International has documented how Palestinians in occupied Palestinian territory are routinely subjected to the arbitrary detention, including through administrative detention, whereas settlers are subject to Israeli civil and criminal law, while Palestinians are subject to a military court system which falls short of international standards for the fair conduct of trial and administrative jurisdiction. Thirdly, violations of the right to access and effective remedy of acts violating fundamental rights. Israel's failure to adequately investigate and enforce the law for acts of violence against Palestinians, together with the multiple legal, financial, and procedural barriers faced by Palestinians in accessing the court system, severely limit Palestinian ability to seek legal redress. The Israeli High Court of Justice has failed to rule on the legality of settlements, as it considered the settlements to be a political issue that it is not competent to hear. Fourthly, violations of the rights of freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. Amnesty International again has documented of Israel's use of military force orders to prohibit peaceful protests and criminalize freedom of expression in the West Bank. Israeli force has used tear gas, rubber bullets, and occasionally leaf rounds to suppress peaceful protests. Violations number 5. Violations of the right to equality and non-discrimination. Systematic and discrimination against Palestinians is inherent in virtually all aspects of Israel's administration in the occupied Palestinian territory. Palestinians are also specifically targeted for a range of actions that constitute human rights violations. The Israeli government allows settlers to exploit land and natural resources that belong to Palestinians. Israel provides preferential treatment to Israeli businesses operating in the occupied Palestinian territory, while putting up barriers to or simply blocking Palestinian one. Israeli citizens receive entitlements while Palestinians face restriction on the grounds of nationality, activity, and religions in contraventions of international standards. The Israeli authorities have created a discriminatory urban planning and zoning system within Area C, where most settlement construction is based. Israel has allocated 70% of the land to settlements and only 1% to the Palestinians. In East Jerusalem, Israel has expropriated 35% of the city for the construction of settlements, while restricting Palestinians to construct only 13% on the land. This figure clearly illustrates Israel's use of regulatory measures to discriminate the Palestinian residents on the Area C. The United Nations has also pointed to the discrimination against Palestinians in the way in which the criminal law is enforced, while prosecution rates for senseless attacks against Palestinians are low, suggesting that a lack of enforcement, most cases of violence against Israeli citizens are investigated and proceeded to the court. Violations number 6. Violations of the right to adequate housing. Since 1967, Israel has constructed 10,000s of homes on Palestinian land to accommodate settlers, while at the same time demolishing an estimated 50,000 Palestinian homes and other structures such as farm buildings and water tanks. Israel has also carries out demolitions as a form of collective punishment against the families of individuals accused of attacks on Israelis. In East Jerusalem, about 800 houses have been demolished since 2004 for lack of permit. Israel also confiscated houses inhabited by Palestinians in the city to allocate them to the settlers. By forcibly evicting and demolishing the homes without providing adequate alternative accommodation, Israel has failed in his duty to respect the right of adequate housing of thousands of Palestinians.
Another violations committed by Israel is the violations of the right to freedom of movement. Many restrictions on freedom of movement for Palestinian residents are directly linked to the settlements, including restrictions aimed at protecting the settlements and maintaining buffer zones. Restrictions include checkpoints, settler-only roads, and physical impediments created by walls and gates. Next is violations of the right of the child.
I'm always sick. I'm always, I don't know. I can't do anything. See all of this. What do you expect me to do? Fix it? I'm only 10. I can't even do anything this morning. I just want to be a doctor or anything to help my people, but I can't. I'm just a kid.
Every year, 500 to 700 Palestinian children from the occupied West Bank are prosecuted in Israeli juvenile military courts under Israeli military orders. They are often arrested in night raids and systematically ill-treated. Some of these children serve their sentences within Israel in violation of the 4th Geneva Convention. The United Nations has also documented that many children have been killed or injured in settler attacks. There are also violations of the right to enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. Restrictions on movement limit Palestinians' access to healthcare. Specialists working with Palestinian populations have also documented a range of serious mental health conditions that stem from exposure to violence and abuse in the occupied Palestinian territory. Next is the violations of the right to water. Most Palestinian communities in West Bank are not connected to water network and are prevented from repairing or constructing wells or water cisterns that hold rainwater. Water consumption in some areas from the West Bank is reported by the United Nations to be 20% to the minimum recommended standard. Israel's failure to ensure that Palestinian residents have a sufficient supply of clean and safe water for drinking and other domestic uses constitutes a violation of its obligations to respect and fulfill the right to water to Palestinians. Furthermore, there are also violations of the right to education. Palestinian students face numerous obstacles in accessing education, including forced displacement, demolitions, restrictions on movement, and a shortage of school places. An independent fact-finding mission in 2012 noted an upward trend of cases of settler attacks on Palestinian schools and harassment of Palestinian children on their way to and from school. Such problems can result in children not attending school and in a deterioration in the quality of learning. Lastly is that violations of the right to earn a decent living through work. The expansion of settlements has reduced the amount of land available to Palestinians for herding and agriculture, increasing the dependency of rural communities on humanitarian assistance. Settler violence and the destruction of the Palestinian-owned crops and olive trees have damaged the livelihoods of farmers. The United Nations has reported that in Hebron city center, the Israeli military has forced 512 Palestinian businesses to close, while more than 1,000 others have shut down due to restricted access for customers and suppliers.